Welcome to 1000 PS. The guys here in Austria have asked me to come to Austria to ride a Austrian bike. More than happy to do that because this is the KTM 990.
Today, we present the highlights of our naked bike test that took place in June 2024 in Lower Austria. 10 motorcycles were tested by our 1000 PS test pilots. The team included the German champion Martin Bauer, the British journalist Adam Child, all the 1000 PS editors, riding technique instructor Ewald Baumgartner, and our stunt pilot Kurt Rubik. We encountered rain multiple times during the test, and our motorcycles had to be continuously cleaned for the shoots. For this, we relied on the Motorex Quick Cleaner, which quickly ensures cleanliness. The motorcycles were tested for a week, and the results were recorded in a ranking table. We published these tables on our 1000 PS website. You can find the link below in the video description. 1000 PS now reaches 4 million motorcyclists from all over Europe, and with this video series, we aim to provide these people with support in making purchasing decisions. During the test, our pilots wore the HJC RFA 71 carbon and enjoyed the good ventilation of the internal sun visor while still benefiting from its low weight. Comfort and safety were provided by EXS Gear, and the 10 motorcycles were directly compared with each other, regardless of displacement, but rated according to the same criteria. Each test pilot then ranked their favorites, which led to an overall assessment. The best motorcycle received the top grade, while the worst was ranked 10th. The tables show in which areas the motorcycles perform above average and where they are more likely to perform below average, regardless of price and displacement.
So I rode the KTM 990 on the world launch in Malaga, and I came back and told all my friends to run to a KTM dealership because it is so much fun and so enjoyable to ride. But it's been a few months since I've ridden it, so I was intrigued as to what it'd be like when I got back on it. Thankfully, it's still barking as I remember. This is the bike where you need to take your license to the local police station and apologise for what you're about to do. There's so much torque and so much drive, it's so much fun. It kind of edges you on and pokes you in the ribs, saying, do a few more wheelies, go a little bit faster. It is a barking, hysterical, full of torque, aggressive street bike. But it can be ridden sensibly. It can be ridden normally. There's a rain mode. There's a plethora of riding aids. The dash is pretty straightforward. You can get in there, change the rider modes. The quick shifter works beautifully. It's quite small. The bars are quite close to you. The dimensions are quite small, but it feels very light. It feels very agile. It's certainly a KTM. Remove the badges and it's not going to be any other bike. But it should come with some kind of health warning because it has got so much torque and so much drive. If you're really old like me, you probably remember the original KTM 990 Duke that in the UK I did a little bit of racing on, and that bike was almost legendary for just being a little bit barking. And this is pretty much the same. If I was going to be a little bit negative, price is above the competition, and once you've bought it, you've got to make the decision whether you've got to buy the tech pack, which is about another £800 or £900-ish, which half the people on YouTube are going to love because you get to test the rider aids before you buy the rider aids, and the other half of people on YouTube are going to absolutely hate it. And every time I've put any KTM video in written form or on YouTube, the few little comments below question reliability, which is always going to be in the back of your mind. But if you want a bike that's going to instantly lose your license, we have it. So I've clearly loved KTM's at 990 Duke. I think it's absolutely barking. I think it's mad. I think that's what motorcycling is about. It makes me feel about 21 or 22 years old, and I can't stop pulling wheelies and riding it in an immature way. However, my colleagues in the rest of Europe might think that I'm a little bit barking, maybe a little bit immature, and they're maybe a little bit more sensible. So whether they love it or hate it as much as I love it.
The KTM 990 Duke is, like all other Dukes, a pure fun machine. For me, it's especially the combination of the super agile yet stable handling with this engine that in my opinion, offers an incomparable amount of low-end torque. This is what makes the Duke unique, what makes the Duke incredibly entertaining. And at the same time, it has made a huge leap forward in terms of suspension compared to the last generation. The geometry has also been adjusted so that it now feels a bit more like a normal naked bike. This means you get a bit more front wheel orientation, but still have the very relaxed, upright Duke typical seating position. Engine, quick shifter, handling, and the way the suspension works now are, for me, basically flawless. The brake, unfortunately, is a weak point for me, which I can't quite explain, especially in this price range. What bothers me about the brake, compared to the other motorcycles, is that it's very hard to dose because there's almost no progression at the lever. I already complained about this on the one I rode in Spain. It also had an undefined dead zone, as this wasn't the case here. You had brake pressure right away, but without progression, and I find it harder to dose, and it actually bothers me. I can ride fast with it, I can brake sharply with it, but it feels much better on other motorcycles. In summary, I'm actually thrilled by the Duke, but I can't be completely enthusiastic because when I look at the prices, I find it too expensive. A street triple RS with much higher quality components costs less, and that, in my opinion, is unacceptable. It hurts a bit, but let's see how the prices develop.
The big difference with the Duke is the step from the last evolution stage we rode. The vehicle has benefited enormously from these innovations. We hardly find any parts from the predecessor. Here, I believe only about 4% of the parts have remained the same. The rest is completely new. We have a completely new chassis. We have a new swing arm construction. A lot of emphasis has been placed on the internal torsion capacity of the entire chassis. And that's actually a huge benefit, or the biggest benefit. Of course, we also have a good engine, which we might talk about later. But what should be briefly mentioned is this chassis' ability to absorb irregularities, even in corners. In corners, it's important that a chassis is flexible in torsion. You can imagine that when I ride over bumps in a corner, the bumps don't press the tire along the suspension elements, but always straight up. But when the vehicle is at a 45-degree angle, there's a slight twist in the chassis when I drive over the bump with the front tire first and then with the rear tire afterward. And the vehicle must have a certain inner flex. A lot of work has gone into this, and the handling benefits from it in such a way that the suspension itself doesn't have to do as much work because the chassis absorbs a lot, especially in corners over bumps. You can feel that you can drive over such sections with very large throttle openings without any movement because it's simply absorbed. This is particularly advantageous on racetrack sections where you ride through corners at full throttle in great lean angles. The vehicle remains incredibly calm. We now have something that wasn't necessarily typical for the Dukes in the predecessors, a very calm suspension. This is already moving towards sports motorcycles. You get a lot of feedback, and this is all a consequence of these changed chassis properties. I really like that because the biggest flaws in the predecessors were simply the lack of stability. There wasn't enough stability, especially in acceleration phases, and that also affected the confidence in the front tire when you wanted to roll faster into a corner. And that, for me, was the biggest step the Duke 990 has now made. Gear changes could also be a bit smoother. It's probably a combination of electronic tuning and the gearbox itself. Mechanically, the gears could snap in a bit more softly. You can also feel it on the shift lever, even when shifting with the clutch, that it's a bit clunky, and the electronic tuning of the quick shifter and also the blipper when downshifting could be a bit smoother in some aspects. But fundamentally, one must say the performance of the new generation has become significantly better compared to the predecessor, both in terms of the engine and the chassis. I'm actually the biggest fan of the chassis, which in some ways now even surpasses the performance of the 1390 Super Duke.
Yes, the KTM 990 Duke is a fascinating further development because it really picks up where the first Super Duke started. This first 990 Super Duke had almost double the consumption, but otherwise similar performance data. And basically, when you look at and ride it, it's a naked bike where naked bike lovers probably think this is exactly how it should be. Perfectly balanced in terms of weight, performance, and a portion of recklessness, but still easy to handle. A perfect middle ground where you might think, who even needs the Super Duke above it, which is basically wasted compared to this perfectly proportioned machine. Everything's cool, everything's good, and you think, why doesn't everyone ride such a Super Duke? Until you look at the price tag, where you realize, okay, it's a motorcycle that fascinates many, but at 15,000 euros in Austria and lower in Germany due to lower taxes, it's something where people who desire it eventually face the choice of saying, okay, I can buy this first used Super Duke for half the price, or the 15,000 euros simply haven't been saved up. It remains an unattainable dream. But it is a dream engine. It's a fascinating high-tech package in a good size, but for many, it may remain a dream due to the price, where it's used as a screensaver background somehow.
Very cool machine, I must say. I got to compare it with the Street Triple RS and the Yamaha MT-09. And I have to say, it's also a really cool, fun machine. I also immediately want to move quickly and, let's say, freestyle. Of course, it has much more power than the 390 Duke. And the engine is a dream. It pulls monstrously in the middle and goes great at the top. In my opinion, the brakes are also very good. The price is, of course, a bit steep. 16,400 is quite tough for such a machine. On the other hand, you also get great features for it. And I have to say the 990 KTM is already a machine I would probably put in my garage for having fun and pushing it. You could probably do very fast lap times on the track with it if you put slicks on it, because it takes quite a while until you've exhausted it and say, now the motorcycle has reached its limit.
Well, I have to say, it was my favorite in many ways. The torque and the engine itself were impressive. Of course, the throttle response is quite sporty. So there are other bikes in the test that are a bit more beginner friendly, but in terms of the riding experience, I had the most fun with it. It really has so much power, and also in terms of the seating position, it's super comfortable, it's sporty, and you don't get the feeling that you're just hanging over the front wheel. You really feel secure. What I also noticed, especially when riding more sportily and approaching a corner, is that the braking performance could have a bit more grip. I felt that when you really open up the throttle, you have to reach for the brakes a bit more and first gauge the braking performance. You don't overdo it and end up in a ditch. But overall, it's a really well-balanced motorcycle. I was thrilled with the suspension. It was fun to ride. I dared to push it, which always indicates that you feel safe. And I would definitely ride it again.
With the KTM 990 Duke, I handled faster curves in wide sweeping turns quite well. It was really fun. With just a slight steering input, the bike leans in beautifully. The foot pegs offer great leverage because you're sitting centrally over them. What I didn't like, or where I personally struggled a bit, is in very tight hairpins because the engine is quite rough there. So it's something where you would say it's not as smooth or as relaxed when accelerating out. But overall, the engine is, of course, extremely powerful, really strong. Unfortunately, so is the price.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. It'll be interesting to see your comments about the tech pack, when you buy it or not when to buy it. And it'd be interesting to see if you've owned a KTM and how the reliability has been with you. Get some questions, fire them below, and we can go into more technical detail then.